Alright, guys, so the lesson for today, and the only lesson this week, because we're busy with simulation and I'm out on Friday for robotics, is completing the square. So, one last thing to go over for solving quadratics. Okay, this is another way to solve quadratics. If factoring doesn't work, if you don't like that pesky, that long quadratic formula, we can do completing the square. Okay, and so when you don't have a perfect square trinomial, you can create one. And that's why we call it completing the square. And so we're going to follow these steps. So step one, as you can see on your screen, is rewrite as x squared plus bx equals c. And what that means is that I need to get c to the right side. Okay, and so over here, for my example, I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides to rewrite this as x squared plus 8x equals -7. All right, c is on the right side. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a half of b, and hopefully you can think, well, 8 is my b here, and then I'm going to square it and add it to both sides, right? Because what I do on one side, I got to do on the other. So half of 8 is 4, and then I'm going to square it to be 16. And so what I'm going to have is x squared plus 8x, let me erase that, plus 8x plus 16 equals, and I'm going to do the same, I'm going to add 16 to the other side, but there's -7 there. So -7 plus 16 is 9. Okay? And so what I can do is that I know that this is the perfect square of x plus 4. All right? Squared. And if you're trying to think, well, how do you know that, Mr. Simpson? Well, because that's what we set up, is to make this a perfect square trinomial. And so we can just factor it when we factor it. And you can do the factoring process here and find out that, yeah, it's x plus 4 times x plus 4. And so that's just x plus 4 squared. And that's going to equal 9. All right? And then, to get rid of a square root, you should know this, to get rid of a square, I take the square root. And so I'm going to take the square root of both sides, x, and I'm left with x plus 4 equals square root of 9, which is plus minus 3. Because remember, it could be -3 times -3 that gets 9, or +3 times +3. And then I'm just going to subtract 4 on both sides, and I'm going to get x equals -4 plus minus 3. All right, and so my answer is going to be -4 minus 3, which would be -7, and -4 plus 3, which is -1. Okay, so that's one way we can complete the square. Let's do a couple more problems. All right, x squared minus 12x plus 27 equals 0. Again, remember, put the c on the right side. You're going to get x squared minus 12x there it is, x squared minus 12x equals -27. Okay? And then again, I'm going to divide this in half. So this is going to be 6, and then square it is going to equal 36. Now look, that was minus 12x. So this has to be x squared minus 6. Or sorry, this is, so that's x minus 6, and that's squared. I'm sorry, I did this all wrong. So wait, it's x squared minus 12x, and I add that 36 to both sides. Okay, and so -27 plus 36 is, again, that's going to leave us with 9, just like in the last problem, okay? And then think about this. All right, so that's a perfect square, and my square here is going to be x minus 6 squared equals 9. Again, you can actually factor that out, all right, and you'll find that two factors that add up to negative 12 is going to be 6, right? And so x minus 6 times x minus 6, which is just x minus 6 squared. All right, take the square root on both sides. I'm left with x minus 6 equals plus or minus 3 again. I add 6 to both sides. Six plus minus 3. All right, and then when I write out my roots here, 6 minus, I always start with the minus because usually that's the lowest number. 6 minus 3 is going to be positive 3. Then 6 plus 3 is going to be positive 9. And so there are my roots. All right, simple enough. Okay, let's go on. Now, what happens if I have a number that's in front of x squared? Well, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to have to divide everything by 4. All right, everything by 4. That's going to give me x squared plus 2x, in this case, minus 5 over 4. Equals 0. All right, well, I skipped one step, but it's plus 5, 4 to get it on both sides. Still going to be the same thing. X squared plus 2x equals 5 over 4. All right, so technically I reversed step 1 and 2. It'll get you the same place. All right, and then we take half of b, which half of b is just 1. And so this is just 1 squared equals 1. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So now I got x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then you got to think 5 fours add 1. You can use your calculator, or you can just remember that 4 over 4 is going to be 1 in this case. And so you get 9 over 4. Okay? All right, and so what I have here is a perfect square of x plus 1 squared. All right, and I take the square root of both sides, and I get x plus 1 equals square root of 9 over 4. Now remember, I'm going to square root this. Square root of 9 over 4, and I'm just going to go up here, equals square root of 9 over the square root of 4. And so I can take the square root of both. And that's going to leave me plus minus 3 up top and 2 in the bottom. And then I subtract 1 on both sides. I'm left with negative 1 plus or minus 3 over 2. Okay, and so I'm going to write out my solution. So negative 1 minus 3 over 2. I know you guys don't like fractions, but we have to do them sometimes. And luckily, though, we have a calculator to help out, but you want to remember that negative 1 minus 3 over 2 will become negative 5 over 2. And then negative 1 plus 3 over 2 is going to become 1/2. Okay, let's do one more example. And we're going to solve each equation by completing the square, of course. So, first step, and I forgot to do it on the last time, but is to move 6 over to the right. So I'm left with 2x squared minus 8x equals negative 6. Okay. We're going to divide everything by 2, everything, because what we do on one side, we do the other. Remember, in this case, we got to divide everything by a. And so we're left with x squared minus 4x equals negative 3. Hey, look, no fractions this time. Yay! All right. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at 4. I'm going to half it. That's 2, and then I square it. And so that's going to be 4 again. All right, I'm going to add that to both sides. X squared minus 4x plus 4. And then the same thing on the right side, add 4. Well, I got negative 3 there. So negative 3 plus 4 is going to be positive 1. All right, and then I want to factor that trinomial. And what you're going to find is that, hey, this is pretty easy to factor. It's just going to be x minus 2 squared, okay, equals 1. Now, again, the way I know that this was a minus instead of a plus is because that we started off with x squared minus 4x plus 4. Remember your rules for factoring, we're just kind of doing shortcuts because we've created perfect square trinomials. Anyways, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. That's going to get rid of the square and leave me with x minus 2. And then the square root of 1 is just 1. So I have plus minus 1. Add 2 to both sides. X is going to equal 2 plus minus 1. All right. And so the roots is 2 minus 1, which is just 1. And 2 plus 1 is 3. Okay. All right. So if you still have any questions, come in the morning and you can ask some there. And the next thing we're going to do is kind of just go over, if you missed class, we were going to go over and start an assignment that is due on Friday. All right, guys, I'll see you later and have a good week.